Welcome to SchezzWho as I deal with my little cowlick that I have going in my hair. This is Hampton Road's top spot for politics, and we are having a nice, great Sunday show. Let me close that little window here. I do want to shout out that which makes the show great, and this thing is bugging me. That, of course, begins with my wife, Andrea Dixon, who founded the channel. She's doing great things at workforce in the state of Virginia right now. So proud of her. She's doing great things, and it's on me to follow up with great things of my own. I also want to shout out my good friend, Mr. Seiko Varner, Positive Vibes Incorporated, a business he founded that helps you out with some credit fixes and tax resolutions, lending, private money, debt consolidation, the good stuff. He also founded Hampton Roads Green Book. That is an app that helps you found great Black and Brown owned businesses in Hampton Roads. It also helped him earn Entrepreneur of the Year, recognized by Black Brand in the 757. So good work in 2024, Mr. Seiko. I also want to shout out Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express, which has a great location here in Portsmouth Boulevard, right here in Portsmouth, my new hometown, but also my old hometown. It's got a location across from Regent University in Virginia Beach. So look for some great food by Ellen's Homestyle and Barbecue Express. Don't forget Mr. Farley Perkins at the Brightway Farley Perkins Agency for Insurance. Got his number right there, 757-271-6655. Lastly, ELG Sweet Boutique, another great Portsmouth restaurant, which this time helps you out with confections and shakes and all kinds of sweet treats. So look for ELG Sweet Boutique for your next little sweet snack. All right, today I want to do another show in my election outreach just to get some reactions with people I know based on the recent election that we just had. So I'm going to have Mr. Joe C. out of Texas come in and just tell us his opinion on the great election that we had. And by great, I don't mean great results, but it, definitely not great results. But it's just great because it's the American process. We get to feel tapped in every 4 years to being able to feel like we can help change what leads America. And we certainly did make a decision early in November. So, Mr. Joe, how about if you want, just give a little bit of your initial reaction to the election that we just had?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not happy about the results. Let me just first say a little bit about myself. I've been active on Facebook, talking about politics, following politics, kind of since Facebook first started as a platform. I've known Conrad for many years
You
on
remember the name of the
Facebook,
group?
and yeah, many different groups we've traveled in, and what's great about it is it I'm someone who I like to kind of keep my identity low key, and what Facebook allows is you can kind of go in there and you can discuss and debate politics with people without trying to get your profile up too much. It's a way where, and that's what I've been kind of involved in many different Facebook groups, going way back to probably since 2006.
Mhm.
And I've gone through many different changes in what my political ideology and outlook is. I went through, I started off as a, I think the first time I got interested in politics was probably during when I was in middle school.
Mhm.
Um, Growing up in North Texas during the 2000 election between Bush and Gore, and back then I grew up in a conservative Republican household, so I was a Bush supporter when in middle school when they would have the mock elections, and that's really when I first became interested. And then I got on Facebook when it used to just be a college student app. You had to have a edu student account to be able to get on Facebook, and then I kind of watched it expand and to what it is now. But that's been an interesting journey. Um, but um, but yeah, I've become more left wing over the years. My views have changed. I went through kind of first started off as a conservative, and then I went through a libertarian phase, back in the 2007 to 2012 period. And then after 2012, my views kind of shifted away from libertarianism and more towards generally progressive, more left wing. I do now believe in having public safety nets, having universal health care. I don't completely want to abolish capitalism necessarily. I'm not. I don't favor capitalism as it exists today. I'm generally hostile to it, but I don't necessarily want to overthrow it completely. But I'm kind of wandering away from your initial question. So you asked me about the election, and yeah,
You
I'm unhappy about the results, but but I do think there's a lot of reasons why it happened, and it's something. And I think the Democratic Party, and it's the reason why I chose to use FDR as my uh, avatar profile picture in this interview today. I think the Democratic Party needs to look back to a time period when it was winning elections, and if you look at FDR during the New Deal era, if you look at the 1936 election, that was a sweep. Like that was, I think the Democrats won every state except I don't have the election map pulled up for 1936, but as I recall, he won like all but two states, and then he had some other major election wins. But in that time period, and I'll grant it, there's some things to criticize about the New Deal coalition. It was kind of there was some racism and there was some and during World War II, the FDR did do the internment of Japanese Americans, and that wasn't good. But
Yeah, and that law
the
hasn't been overturned yet.
no, it hasn't. But anyway, but a lot of the reforms that he made, and yeah, you have the election results pulled up, and that was a clear sweep, and we haven't had elections like that since kind of like the I think the last time was if you look at the 1984 election between Reagan and Mondale, that was another major sweep. But for most of our lifetime, a lot of the elections have been close.
Mhm.
There hasn't really been like an election in a long time where one side just completely swept the board against the other side. Like they're calling the current election between Trump and Kamala Harris a sweep, but if you actually look at the results, it's a lot closer than they make it seem like. I think the popular vote. I mean, there's still votes being counted in some states, but I think that's closed in, and but we
Mhm.
haven't had major sweeps like that since the 80s with Reagan and since the 30s with FDR. But
I recall
that New
Nixon also
Deal.
had some pretty big sweeps too.
Oh yeah, Nixon did too against McGovern. But the that New Deal coalition, it was kind of an alliance between Southern Democrats because in the South they didn't want to vote for the party of Lincoln after the Civil War,
Mhm.
and Northern liberals because you had a lot of people moving into the North that were more progressive, and in that coalition there was often some like hostility between the two groups, between like the Southern conservative Democrats and the Northern liberals, but FDR was able to hold it together, and 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 did some amazing stuff. I do think going forward, the Democrats need to get focused on talking about bread and butter issues because for the average voter, a lot of people are having to deal with daily economic things that stress them out economically because people are having to work, pay, prices of goods and services are going up while income is not rising with the level that prices are going up. And most people, they're working too many hours because we don't live in a country that gives people mandatory paid vacation time like a lot of Europeans enjoy. So people are overworked, underpaid, overbilled. Rent is going up everywhere. Cost of groceries is going up. Cost of living is going up. And what happened in this election was, I mean, the Democratic message was, yes, we realize, there's this inflation, but it's happening because of this or that reason. But I think what they say in politics is when you're on the defense, you're already losing.
Yep.
And for the average voter, they're looking at the cost of living going up, and they just blame whoever's in office. And this has been a bad year for incumbent parties all over the world. You look in Britain, they just the Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak just got wiped out in an election, and now the Labour Party is in office with Keir Starmer, and he's already becoming unpopular. And then in France, they had an election that Macron had to barely hold on, and he had to make some last minute alliances. But this has just been, and I think Germany's going through some government collapses too right now, or where their coalition has fallen apart, and they're going to have an election soon. But this has been a bad time for incumbent parties overall, because inflation is a global problem. There's a lot of things causing inflation. You got the war in Ukraine, which has impacted grain prices, because a lot of grain that gets shipped out to a lot of places that now are having food insecurity. It comes from Ukraine, and because of the war, that's really impacted the shipping of that. And so a lot of seed oils and grain prices have shot up, and that's had a detrimental effect to inflation. And then the Russia being sanctioned out of the energy market, that's caused gas prices to rise, and gas prices have kind of been coming down a little bit. But all of that we did have some bad inflation, and we were also recovering from the pandemic, and the pandemic caused a massive global disruption to the supply lines and everything. And coming back from that, the upside of that was that labor had more leverage during that time, because we had a labor shortage, where you remember all these places were short staffed and looking for people, and they were offering pay, like fast food places were offering people $15-20 an hour because they were just so short staffed. And so on the flip side, like, you had labor had more leverage, and workers actually got more appreciation. But a lot of people were complaining about the prices going up and everything.
Mhm.
Which is, it's interesting how we as a society prioritize that. Now if I'm rambling on, just go ahead and jump in and steer me back into
Okay. Well,
into
a lot
port.
of what I would like to talk about, you were already starting to. I think we could circle back around to a second, but is there something you would like to tap into where your part of the country felt like during this election?
Well,
Because if I recall, you
te-
also had a rather big Senate race that was happening.
yes. So we had so Texas is interesting because we're a red state. And we've been solidly red for a long time. We haven't had a Democrat win a statewide office in Texas since the Ann Richards days, and that was in the early '90s when I was still a small child. I'm in my late 30s now, so I've gone my whole life with, like, Republicans being in control of state government. They control both houses of the state legislature. They control all the Supreme Court offices. Well, in Texas, we have two kind of Supreme Courts, because we have a Texas Supreme Court, and we also have a Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Um, and all of our judges statewide are elected in Democratic partisan elections, which is um, interesting, but that's the way our system is. So we have, like, judges that run in Republican primaries to become judges, and they get elected in statewide elections. But our whole state government is Republican, and
Hmm.
it's been that way for a while. But we have areas of Texas that are very blue, like the big cities like Dallas, Houston. So Dallas, you have Dallas County. Houston, you have Harris County, and we have county governments. So, like, in Texas, we have kind of a county government system where, like, the district attorney, the sheriff, the county commissioners court. They're elected, and they're elected in partisan elections. Our city councils are nonpartisan. So when you run for city council, you don't run as a Democrat or Republican. You just run as a city council candidate, even though Democrats and Republicans will still back candidates in city council elections. But we have big blue counties in Texas. So like Harris County is Houston, Travis County, Austin is also very blue, very progressive.
Which
Behar
county
County
has
is.
Jasmine Crockett?
I'd have to look that up, what district she's from. But
Mhm.
and then you have like San Antonio, which is Behar County, and El Paso is a blue area.
And the college
Um,
towns too, basically. So Austin, maybe Lubbock, Waco.
Lubbock is, well, I've lived in Lubbock. Lubbock is still pretty Republican. There's parts of Lubbock that are more liberal leaning. And some of the colleges, there's some colleges are more liberal, like UT, and then others are have more conservative student bodies. But it's kind of a mixed bag. Um, but yeah, it was disappointing to see Colin Allred lose, especially the margin was similar to with Beto O'Rourke. And I used to live in the district that he ran in as a state House of Representative, because he defeated a Republican named Pete Sessions. And Pete Sessions moved to a different district, and got back into Congress. But I remember in his race, I first voted for Brett Shipp in the Democratic primary, but then I voted for Colin Allred in the general election, um, when he beat Pete Sessions. But I like Colin Allred. I do think he's kind of more of a corporate Democrat. Like he's generally supported by the party establishment, and on the issues he generally follows, like votes the way that the Democratic leadership wants him to vote. Um, so people that have more anti-establishment leanings, like I do, are probably going to be a little bit skeptical about him. But I'd take him over Ted Cruz any day, any day. So when the general election was going on, I was enthusiastically supporting him, even if he is a bit on the pro-establishment side. But
Mhm.
but I think the reason he and Beto O'Rourke, well, it's a tough thing because in some red states like Kentucky and stuff, you can get Democrats like Andy Beshear winning because they can go to the right on some social issues and still win a Democratic primary. But what Democrats have a hard time doing in Texas is we have a red state, but a very blue primary voter base. So like there's like because we have a bunch of big blue cities, and so if you're a Democratic candidate, you can't go too far to the right in the primary because people in the primary voters won't vote for you. But then that prevents you from going right on some issues that you need to go right on, probably like gun control and stuff. Because that's one thing that hurt Beto O'Rourke was he he had a good run in 2018 against Ted Cruz, because he kind of stayed like on the gun control issue, because that's a big landmine issue. And I know your position on guns, but for politics' sake, it's an issue that hurts Democrats a lot, because a lot of the Texas voters are very, very pro-gun. They don't want to hear about assault weapons being banned. They don't want to hear any of that. And so when Beto O'Rourke ran for president, you remember he did that big "hell yeah, I'm going to take their guns" quote, and that really hurt him when he tried to run for governor against our current governor, because
Yeah.
people kept playing that quote of his. And I think Colin Allred kind of stayed more quiet on the gun issue, but Republicans still, they hammer that issue home every election time. And I think they also hammered the trans issue a lot, which which is unfortunate because the trans community, it's a community that's facing a lot of heat because the Republicans have identified a minority group that doesn't have a lot of political power because there's it's a small number of people, and they've locked into this fear that like a lot of conservatives probably have of, what if my kid becomes trans or something. And they spread a lot of misinformation, but they use that issue against Colin Allred. I remember seeing ads play against him saying that he's going to let men play in women's sports, or he'll allow transgendered surgeries in schools, which is nonsense. But they kind of they forced Colin Allred, to actually have to say some things that then upset like a lot of trans activists. And it just kind of it was bad all around. And so I do think Texas it's going to take some time for it to become kind of a blue or purple state. I do think we're kind of where Virginia. I want to say that like 20 years ago, I think Virginia was more of a red state than it is now. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, we last had a Republican governor 2009, but I think that is, and largely a trend with Virginia is that we sort of reject the president who was just elected, because in 08 it was Obama, then to get Bob McDonnell. And then we had basically Kane and Warner and McAuliffe all had turns at being governor as well. So I project going into next year that we're going to, of course, because by law, Glenn Youngkin can't run for consecutive terms in Virginia, which means it's wide open in 2025. And if Trump is just elected, then I would probably think it's going to be another Democrat. And the current leader is Abigail Spanberger for some reason.
And I know politically, Virginia, there's a large part of the state that's red, but you do have in Fairfax County, and I've been to Fairfax County before. You have a lot of people who work in DC, and they tend to vote like bluish. And then you have Richmond, Virginia, I think is another blue area.
I'm also in the Hampton Roads area, which is pretty blue as well. We call it the Seven Cities. I looked over the stats for the election to note that the top of the ticket, Kamala Harris, Tim Kaine, all did very well in cities like Virginia Beach or Chesapeake, which are considered a little redder. But that's mainly because the municipal elections tended out being very Republican winning, but the top of the ticket was very Democrat winning. So it's interesting how that worked out. If you look at the map of Virginia, there's a lot of blue tint to the Eastern Virginia, Hampton Roads area too.
You got your next door neighbor, West Virginia, which is a solidly red state, which is interesting because West Virginia was created during the Civil War as a breakaway. They seceded from the state of Virginia because they supported the Union. They didn't want to fight for the Confederacy. But now it's a very Trumpian state. What do you think about that?
I always thought it was interesting that that seemed to be the thing that they would want to do, is break off in a moment in time when that was the moment to be, quote, woke, I guess, in the 1860s. Now they're incredibly solid red that even Joe Manchin had to get out because he knew he was going to read the tea leaves and lose. I think his last name is Justice. Isn't that the guy who ended up being the senator now out of West Virginia?
I figured it's going to be a Republican that's going to replace Joe Manchin. I do think part of what hurt Joe Biden the most in his term was Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, because they essentially prevented him from being able to. I mean, he did get some legislative accomplishments, but they kept hamstringing him and preventing him from getting a lot more done that he could have gotten done. And that's just because Democrats didn't have the seats in the Senate to be able to do things
They did if they didn't mind overruling the parliamentarian.
Yeah, and that's another weakness that I think liberals and a lot of Democrats have, is a lot of them are very institutionalist in their mindset. They're very they believe in like respecting all the norms. And Jon Stewart did a good segment about that, on how like Republicans, they don't give a shit about norms.
Right.
I don't know if you allow profanity on your show or not, but
I say shit too.
oh, okay. Yeah, they don't care about norms. They will violate any norm that they need to get what they want. But Democrats, they seem to hamstring themselves all the time with their obsession with norms and following procedure. And I think that's another problem that Kamala Harris had during the campaign, was it seemed like every time she spoke, she was speaking from a script, that she was giving out talking points that were developed by a focus group. And she didn't do a lot of interviews that were either unscripted or freewheeling. I do think she should have gone on the Joe Rogan show.
Yep.
She missed a big opportunity. And I know originally she said it was because of scheduling, and then she counter offered to let him travel out there and do an hour with her. But I think later we heard that there were people on her staff that didn't want her to go on his show because he's viewed as toxic by. And
And I
they
think
tried to blame
an
leftists.
hour is what they wanted her to do, regardless of show, because an hour is what she did with Club Shay Shay, which was
Yeah.
compared to all the other guests that he seems to get, rather underwatched. And I wonder if that signified that she was just not popular.
Well, I think she was concerned about being in kind of, because with Joe Rogan, it's a 3 hour unscripted conversation. So
Mhm.
she was I think Kamala Harris might have been afraid of being in kind of an unscripted moment that could become a viral like clip. Um, and every time she spoke, I think she wants to kind of keep it on script and keep it on message. And I feel like with this modern media age, we're kind of past the age of like the professional politician who is on script, on message all the time. Because that's one thing I'll say about Trump, is he'll ramble on and say a bunch of nonsense, but there's a segment of the population that kind of likes that about Trump, that he's unscripted, that he'll just go and say the most unhinged, crazy. Like Joe Rogan even said, you say a lot of wild shit. And people like that because a lot of people are fed up with like the status quo and with the system, and they view Trump as kind of like a chaos agent who's just going to go in there like a wrecking ball and just wreck the whole status quo and wreck the system. Now, one of the as a progressive, like what we usually say is that Trump's a fake populist.
Mhm.
Gonna he's not anti-establishment. I mean, like Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. That's about as establishment as you can possibly get.
Yeah, you notice how a lot of the rhetoric over the past cycles has been to be very afraid of what George Soros does with his money. And then you have
Yeah,
Elon Musk coming in and doing considerably worse in terms of using his money to cause influence.
yeah.
That's
George
just
Soros has always been kind of a boogeyman on the right, and I know that there's probably some like anti-Semitic undertones to that too, when like with some of the way they characterize him. And But if you want to go like, there's billionaires supporting both sides in
yes.
politics. The
He got like
Republicans, they
83
certainly,
billionaires, I think, that got her, and he got about 52, somewhere around that.
yeah. I mean, like you have people like the Mercers, and you had the Koch brother. I think they used to be Koch brothers, but one of
Right.
them passed away. But you have the Koch, and you had Sheldon Adelson, and now you have. I mean, I could just keep listing them, but
That's the type of stuff that gets you and I a little bit more progressive day to day, is just to realize that Marian Anderson, I think her name is Marian, or is it Mary? Alderson now given $100 million this cycle just for Israel-related topics. Meanwhile, what could $100 million have done if she wanted to donate it in a very productive way domestically? That wasn't of concern to her. It was just to make foreign policy decisions. And that's why you got to keep money out of politics.
Elon Musk, I mean, his decision to purchase Twitter, which is now called X, was people were saying, "Oh, this is a bad business decision. He's going to lose money," and he did probably lose a lot of money on that. He paid, I think, $45 billion for it, and he had to get a bunch of financing, and I think its value has dropped. But what he's going to get as a propaganda machine, because that social media is the new media. Most people are getting their news from scrolling on Facebook or Twitter, and what the algorithms show people can have a huge influence on the media. And Elon Musk was able to create this new kind of propaganda machine for the right. And I still have an X account. I need to get. I'm going to get on Blue Sky to see what how everything is over there. But I've heard some critiques. But it has become completely flooded with just like alt-right types now. Like in MAGA Trump supporters on there, and that's why a lot of people have started. They're leaving Twitter now. I think Stephen King has left. I think Rob Reiner has left, and a lot, like, eventually it's just going to keep becoming more and more of just a right-wing echo chamber, as people just feel like they're tired of just being insulted every time they post a comment, and you just have like hundreds of Trump supporters. I don't even know if like they're all people, or some of them might be bots, or
I think
trolls.
Musk got caught with that, is that he cooked a lot of the books with X in terms of how many hundreds of thousands to millions of it are actually just replicated bots.
Right. Musk is going to benefit a lot from the Trump administration, because he's going to get all these federal contracts. I'm sure Starlink I mean, Tesla stock has been going up a lot since post-election.
Which is odd, because he and Vivek are at the start of the Department of Government Efficiency, which is designed allegedly to cut the fat out of government, in which case his entire wealth seems to be really propped up on federal subsidy.
Yeah, well, when he talks about cutting, he's not going to be talking about cutting his own subsidies. When they start talking about cutting, what they mean they want to cut is they want to cut Medicaid and Social Security, and food assistance for people that need it.
And that would be the type of stuff that would probably lead to a rather large swing in the other direction within 2 years for the House of Representatives. And I guess we might lead towards me asking you, what do you think our future should be like in the next year to two as we reorganized to go against the Trump administration?
So yes, so this is going to be crucial, because if you remember when Justice Democrats was getting active, and this was the 2018 midterms, and you had Justice Democrats campaigning for people like AOC. I think that was the first election where AOC
Ilhan Omar,
defeated
Ayanna Pressley, women like that.
And this is something that progressives going forward need to be doing, is we need to be getting involved in primaries, because the primary election determines, and there's a lot of districts where we got to, and it's tough, because we've lost some ground, with Jamal Bowman got defeated in his primary, partly because they changed his district, because he used to have more of the Bronx in his district, and I think they took part, like, I think they left him with like a small bit of the Bronx, and they added some suburban neighborhoods to his district, and that's why he got defeated. Um, but I do think it's people who want to build a progressive movement and are serious about building it need to get more involved in local elections and in primary elections for House seats, not just the U.S. House, but for state House, state Senate. And it's tough because it's tough to kind of get. I think a lot of the left is online, and
Mm-hmm.
there's big communities, like there's big, big streamers online. You have on the left, you have people like um, Hassan Piker and Destiny, um, and Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland of like the Majority Report, and then you have other people like Kyle Kalinske and
Who found
Crystal
Justice
Ball.
Democrats.
Yeah, and so there's all this this media sources, but a lot of people are still not getting organized enough at the local level, partly because a lot of people are in, and I throw myself into this category too, because I'm someone who doesn't like to get out in public. I'm more online myself. Um, so it is tough, and in a lot of these areas, people are shy, people are socially have social anxiety, so they don't want to get out there and get involved um, in stuff. I also think people should understand that it is going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a race, and things are not going to happen overnight. Politics it's a long, drawn out process, and I've become more of an increment. Like I believe progress is something that can only be achieved incrementally, because it's very difficult, especially with our system of government, to have like rapid change. Um, we have a legislative system that it's very hard to get Congress to do anything because of the filibuster, um, which hopefully, I'm actually
That's
hoping
another thing
Republicans,
regarding norms.
yeah, I'm actually hoping Republicans get rid of the filibuster, because I've been so sick of arguing with like pro filibuster Democrats saying that, oh, well, if we get rid of the filibuster, what'll you say when Republicans get in power again? And I'm like, well, I just hope Republicans are the ones that finally get rid of it, and then that way, when
And
Democrats
there
get
will
back
be an
into
excuse.
office, yeah, and we can get more done, because um, but I just think going forward for the 2026 election, it's going to be a tough fight, because the finger pointing is already happening. You have people in the establishment blaming the left for the election loss. Um, and I knew that was going to happen
Yeah.
even before the election. And they're already doing that. They're blaming progressives. They're blaming wokeness, even though, and Kyle Kalinske had a good Twitter post about that. Like, Kamala Harris did not campaign as a woke candidate. She was, every time I'd see an ad with Kamala Harris, she'd be like, "I'm a gun owner. I believe in tough border security." I
Ran like a blue dog Democrat.
Yeah, and she picked Tim Walz, and there was all these like images. I'm a high school football coach. I'm a Midwesterner. I go hunting and stuff, and here's me in my hunting gear. Um, but they still characterized her and the Democrats as woke, which that's just that terminology woke, which has become something that you ask someone on the right to I define what that means. Like, what does woke even mean? Because I think it's become kind of like a catch-all like phrase to just like they slap it on everything that they don't like. It's like, oh, there's too many non-white characters in this Disney movie I'm watching. This is woke.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or it's become kind of like a cliche word that is probably like the modern term for what used to be called political correctness or PC, but I remember when it first like started as kind of like an academic term that was used in kind of more of a university setting, but now it's just kind of become this cliche political term. But I just think going forward, I think the Democrats are going to benefit from incumbent parties usually don't do well in their midterms, anyways, because after 2 years, people are going to start to realize that Trump's not delivering on many of his. Excuse me. Hmm. Take a sip of water there. I just think the Democrats will have a boost in the midterms and might take back the House and Senate, and then we got to look at the 2028 elections.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we have more economically populist central candidates when it comes to 2028. Any ideas on who you would want to see run for president 2028?
So yeah, I like AOC, and I know that's kind of a dark horse candidate, but how old is she going to be in 2028? I do think
Well, she's got to be
my
35.
favorite
I
one.
think she's in her low 30s now. AOC. Let's check that here. She's 35 currently.
So she could run for president, and I actually think she could inspire a lot of progressives to come vote for her. I also really like Jon Stewart, um, because I think he would be the counter to Trump.
Mhm.
If people are wanting a celebrity, someone who is has the skills that Trump had from show business and can apply it to the campaign trail, I think Jon Stewart would be amazing. And I also think Jon Stewart is very progressive on the issues, and so he'll support universal health care. He'll support student loan forgiveness. He'll support all the progressive causes. Um,
And
I
he'll
do
do it
think,
as a personality that we can kind of like, one who doesn't feel as phony.
yeah,
And I think that'll help generate a lot of turnout.
and I mean, there's just the we're gonna have to see who's kind of getting their profile up in the next 4 years. See what happens in the 2026 midterms, because you can have people that can like get into Congress, and I think we just need to keep an eye on the progressive media space, because
Which is
that's
right
something
here on
that,
SchezzWho.
yes, and this is something that progressives are at a disadvantage at, honestly, when it comes to media, is the right wing media is so well funded,
Mhm.
because you have all these like people always like say, oh, the liberal media, but it's not actually liberal, because you have all these like right wing media outlets, from Fox News to AM talk radio to the online streamers like the Daily Wire and the Blaze and Infowars and all of that stuff, and then and you have all the people like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin, and they have financing coming from all sorts of stuff, some of it Russian, but they get so much funding, and the left has nothing close to that. I remember, I think at one point, like in the mid 2000s, they had Air America radio to compete with like conservative AM talk radio,
Mhm.
and then you do get some of the bread tube, kind of the YouTube progressive shows, and then you got kind of like the MSNBC, which is the corporate Democrat like wing. But and then I think what the left has is kind of like the cultural dominance in Hollywood, um, but that's not really explicitly political. Like when people talk about like liberal Hollywood, they're more talking about like, okay, they're more liberal on social issues, but they're not talking about politics all the time. I mean, all art and media is political, like, but what I'm saying is the left doesn't have anything close to what the right has in terms of just having a constant media apparatus, just constantly pushing the left wing talking points. Oh, okay. An economy for all, is that something that you put together?
Now, this is the Justice Democrats webpage and their
Oh yeah,
platform. So that is definitely an economic populist message.
I think what happened with the just like I don't know how active they still are. I remember they had some issues come up because it was originally founded by Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kalinske, and I think they had some issue come up with like Cenk Uygur where they forced him out. Um, Something to do with like he probably had some very tasteless comments that he made early in his like media career, and people dug that up, and he got forced out. And I think I remember Kyle Kalinske stepped down afterwards because when Cenk Uygur got forced out, and I don't know if how active they still are. I think they still do stuff, but nothing close to like what it was back in like 2018.
Mhm. Well, Mr. Joe, we're nearing the end here. Would you like to give any final thoughts regarding the election that we've had and going forward? What things you would like to suggest?
Well, I mean, this was obviously a bummer. I was I also wanted to say that I don't think we got to really like get into the third party talk yet in this interview that much
If you'd
because
like to.
I know there was some debate about whether to vote for Kamala Harris or vote for a third party candidate. I voted for Harris and Walz, and I encouraged other people to do it because I did view, and I still consider Trump to be very dangerous. I do think that he has very authoritarian tendencies that he's not like a normal Republican candidate in terms of like what him and his movement represents. Um, and I also thought that like a lot of the third party field. I mean, you had Jill Stein, who she runs every 4 years. It's kind of like a like what's that insect that comes back every 4 years? Cicadas
Cicadas.
or
Mhm.
cicadas, yeah. So she'll appear every 4 years to run on the Green Party platform. We also had Cornel West, which I love Cornel West. I think he's a great civil rights leader and great university lecturer, and he's and I do love a lot of his takes on the issue, but he did a very poor job running his campaign. It was like it looked like pure chaos from the outside. I think he started off with the People's Party with like Jimmy Dore, and then he switched to the Green Party, but then he had some clash of visions with Jill Stein and kind of like the Green Party people because I think Cornel West is more identity focused while
Mhm.
Jill Stein is more class focused in what kind of like they're both very progressives, but I think Cornel West is more because he authored the book Race Matters and stuff. So I think he had more of a vision of being more like civil rights and identity politics focused. And I think Jill Stein was more class based, like leftism. And so then they had a clash of visions, and I think he also struggled to get on the ballot in a lot of states. He wasn't on the ballot in that many states. That's one advantage of like being with the Green Party or the Libertarian Party is they
Valid
get
access.
ballot access
Mhm.
in a lot more states because it's very tough for a third party in our system because some states make it very difficult to get on the ballot than others do. But I voted for Harris because this for me this was I did kind of I have become more of a believer in the idea of voting for the lesser of two evils, and I do agree that I Biden's policy on Gaza was very troubling, and I understand why people didn't want to vote for Kamala Harris because of what has been going on in Gaza. And I don't want to get too much into that because I know you said you get this. We're kind of coming to the end here,
Yeah, it's been
but
about 49 minutes. It's been a good discussion.
yeah, it has been. But so I understand that people were upset at Biden over that, and now I've had some like pretty fierce debates online because I've had people like that I've debated with on Facebook call me a genocide supporter because I was
Mm-hmm.
urging people to vote for Kamala Harris, which I think was kind of over the line. It's funny how like I'm against vote shaming third party voters, but there's some third party activists who vote shame back at like I'm against vote shaming from either side. So I'm not going to be someone who's going to vote shame someone for voting third party, but I've encountered some third party voters who like I've been called like a genocide supporter because I'm saying, hey, we should vote for Harris, and I think that's put some people off. And I do think now there's like finger pointing. I don't think people who didn't vote or voted third party should be blamed fully for Harris's loss because I do think ultimately when you're the candidate, you have the responsibility to convince people to vote for you. And But I do think people should have voted for her because I'm for harm reduction, and I do think her winning the election would have been a better outcome than Trump winning. Um, and I say that from knowledge of like the 2016 election. I did vote third party in the 2016 election, and I remember Trump's first term. And looking back on it, I regret not voting for Hillary Clinton because, as much as I disliked Clinton, she would not have appointed people to the Supreme Court who would have overturned Roe versus Wade in Chevron and a lot of other cases that the current Supreme Court that's 6-3 conservative has done.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have had a chance if Kamala Harris would have won. Maybe Clarence Thomas or Sam Alito might have retired or something else, and she could have gotten to make the court a little less right wing. But now that's over because now that Trump's going to get in, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito are going to be able to retire, and he's going to replace them with younger versions of themselves, and the court's probably going to be conservative for the next 30 to 40 years. But that we'll end on that depressing note.
Well, I still enjoyed the talk. It's always good to have a nice little conversation about what we experienced, what we
Yes,
would have liked to have seen, and of course the fact that we're not going away, we're pressing forward, and just what our ideas
absolutely.
are going forward. So I'm glad to have you on, Mr. Joe.
And I look
Perhaps
forward to sharing this because I'm usually active on Facebook, and so it'll be fun putting this in like the Facebook group that I'm pretty active in, that you're active in as well.
getting
And
more
I do think it's nice being able to actually have a conversation instead of communicating by text.
indeed.
I know I chose to keep my camera off, but it has been nice to just have a free flowing conversation or
You got it.
discussion.
And I'd like to have more with more and more people that I'll reach out for online. And just that's the thing with the progressive media, that we got to make it as we see it. And
Absolutely.
so the onus is on me. My own responsibility is to watch the day-to-day news and bring it out the way it needs to be said. Because I don't want it to be quiet right now. I want it to be loud.
No, yeah, we just got to get it out there.
Indeed. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Joe, for coming on. I hope you have a great Sunday.
You too, Conrad.
See you around. And of course, for those watching on SchezzWho, like the episode, subscribe to the channel, because in order for me to bring out the content, you guys got to be watching every time it comes on out. You'll be able to learn as much as we'll be able to share for you. And this has been a great show on this Sunday. You guys have a good one.